Welcome into the Stack Shack Sports Show. Today we're going to be talking about Notre Dame football and a key off-season for Notre Dame where they added some incredible pieces and locked in both assistant head coach, offense and defensive coordinators locked in for the future. This is why today we're going to talk about it. Why I believe Notre Dame may be a dark horse for the college football playoff national championship this season. It's early. We haven't seen anybody play. Spring games aren't even happening yet. Most people are getting ready for the draft. But Notre Dame has made some key offseason changes that, when combined with what should be a fairly easy schedule that you're looking at right now on my screen, could lead to a strong bid for the college football playoff. Reminder, college football playoff next season is moving to a new format. 12 teams get in. With this schedule and the teams they're playing, combined with the coaching staff and the players that they've added in the transfer portal and some of the recruits coming, the cohesiveness of this team, returning starters coming back, I think bodes very, very well for a college football playoff appearance and potentially a very deep college football playoff run. So let's get straight into it. The first thing is this team, this Notre Dame team, is going to be anchored by its defense. They have some very key returning starters, especially on that defensive line. Both tackles, Riley Mills and All-American Howard Cross, decided to come back this season. Absolutely huge pickups. You combine that with Botello, who had incredibly impactful plays in big games from his defensive end position with 4 sacks, and those 4 sacks came at just incredibly important times, means this defensive line is scary, and we haven't even talked about transfers, which we will in a moment. You combine that again with a young linebacking core, but they were able to keep Jack Kaiser, somebody who had 62 tackles last season. Someone who has been in the program, been in this defensive system for a while. He is coming back. Now, I don't think he will be playing all of a sudden a middle linebacker calling the defense, but he will add a very important veteran voice in that linebacker room. The young linebackers looked good last season. This is a Notre Dame defense that was very, very strong last season. Like, no ifs, ands, and buts about it. Their offense sputtered at some times, struggled in some moments, struggled in some big games, and yes, they only had 10 players on the field against Ohio State. But you know what? If they did have 11, Ohio State doesn't score that touchdown. We've looked at those videos. Go watch the video that I did reacting. Yes, I'm absolutely furious that that would happen to Notre Dame, but if you look at the defensive setup, they were ready to stop that run play. They were just missing a player to fill that one gap. Everything else was locked up. So this is a very strong defense coming back, especially, though, on the back end. Preseason All-American Benjamin Morrison, who I don't understand how he consistently gets overlooked. He had an absolutely incredible breakout season a couple years ago with his freshman year, then last year as a sophomore. Yeah, he had 3 interceptions, 10 pass breakups, 31 tackles. But the other key is, if you look at his stats and what he gave up almost no yards or catches to some of the best wide receivers in the game last season. When he matched up against Marvin Harrison, he held him to 3 catches for 32 yards. 3 catches. Shut him down. That's it. The great Michigan defense couldn't do that against Michigan. And what was the #1 defense in college football last season? Marvin Harrison had 5 catches for 118 yards. On Morrison Island, he had 30 yards on 3 catches. Absolutely locked him down. So he's an incredible returner. And then you get the unanimous All-American, won the award for the best defensive player in the backfield there. Xavier Watts decided to come back. He had 7 picks, 4 pass breakups, 52 tackles, was an absolute machine. This defense is going to be terrifying. This is the best defense that we've seen out of Notre Dame in a while, and they've had some good defenses. Combine that with the fact Al Golden, their defensive coordinator, gets locked in, and this was the other major move. Notre Dame replaces Jared Parker, their offensive coordinator, with Mike Denbrock. If you don't recognize that name, you should. He led the #1 offense and the Heisman Trophy winner last year at LSU as the offensive coordinator. And he moves to Notre Dame in a lateral move, didn't get a promotion, comes back to Notre Dame. He's coached here previously to be the new offensive coordinator. And really, most Notre Dame fans will tell you this was a bit of an upgrade. It was. To bring Denbrock in for Jared Parker was an upgrade. Parker really struggled in the biggest of games. Ohio State scored 14 points against them. It's not enough, right? Against Louisville, didn't score a lot of points. Offense wasn't good enough. The losses for Notre Dame last season were when their offense couldn't move the ball. Their offensive coordinator gets picked up as a head coach. He moves on, and it's a bit of a breath of fresh air. Oh my goodness, what do we got to do? What did Marcus Freeman say? Call Mike Denbrock. We got to get you here. What's it going to take? LSU fumbled the bag a little bit by not extending him, not locking him down. Notre Dame comes in and gets him. Combine that with extending Al Golden. Last year, fantastic defense. The year before, struggled a little bit, but the offense was so anemic, the defense really was out there all the time. They were a top 5 total defense in 2023. Averaged 15.9 points a game. Returning all of those starters that we just looked at, and you've locked in the coaching staff, which is absolutely huge. Both coordinators locked in for 4-year contracts. Now, obviously, there can be buyouts and other things like that, but all good. He's locked in for the next season, which is great for recruiting, great for transfer portal, and great for those guys coming back. That consistency in the coaching staff is absolutely huge. Yards per attempt last year, 5 yards per attempt in the pass. In a passing league, in a passing era of football, this is one of the best defenses against the pass. He's fantastic and was a huge addition to lock in along with the offensive coordinator to Mike Denbrock. They're building something. Marcus Freeman is building a staff. Our biggest complaint with the Jared Parker hire last offseason, because remember, Tommy Rees, previous offensive coordinator at Notre Dame, moves on to go work with Saban at Alabama. What happened in that moment is we ended up promoting from within for a first-time offensive coordinator. To me, I think that was the bad decision last season. Marcus Freeman is a defensive head coach. He knows the defense. He's inexperienced on the offensive side of the ball. And to not hire an experienced offensive coordinator to pair with the young head coach. Again, Marcus Freeman's entering his 3rd season. He's not been a head coach for very long. Was a mistake last season, and we saw it. The offense was not as good as it should have been. Most would say it underperformed when you consider Sam Hartman coming over, a very statistically strong quarterback, and the pieces they had, a lot of question marks. A lot of question marks on that offense. Mike Denbrock, on the other hand, is a very experienced offensive coordinator, an offensive coordinator that just is coming off of coaching a Heisman Trophy winning quarterback and the #1 offense in college football. That's huge. That is absolutely huge to lock in. Combine that with the transfer portal. Now, it didn't always look so great. Notre Dame struggled a little in the transfer portal. They lost some pieces, so not everything is perfect, but no team is, right? So they do lose some pieces on offense, especially, I would say. Tyree had just transitioned from running back to receiver last season, was really starting to come into his own. He decides to leave. That was tough. Tobias Merriweather, another wide receiver, gone. Braylon James didn't really play. He's a sophomore, but he leaves. Rico Flores, another wide receiver. This is a problem. Tight end, center. Tough. Offensive lineman, again, he's a freshman, so it wasn't really playing. We don't know. Did lose a defensive end. Backup defensive lineman, fine, whatever. Barnes, cornerback, sophomore, young, not a big deal. Henderson had come in. It wasn't playing as much as he wanted to. Xavier Watts comes back. Well, all of a sudden, Notre Dame started pulling people in. They pull in a very, very solid safety in Jordan Clark from Arizona State. Fantastic. Comes in as a senior. You're going to put him next to Xavier Watts. And that's why you have people like Ramon Henderson leaving. Why you have Antonio Carter leaving. Safeties. They're not going to play. We have All-Americans here, right? We don't need it. Then Notre Dame did something that they have struggled with previously, and that is they locked in receivers. Chris Mitchell, an absolute speedster. Dominant at Florida International, at a small school, coming in. Now you're going to start to see why we lost so many receivers. Bo Collins, absolute massive 6'3", 210, big target wide receiver coming over from Clemson. He's had some big catches in big games. We've seen him. Then to top it off, they get one of the highest rated quarterbacks. Now, he is coming off of a bit of an injury. We will have to see. We saw in the bowl game for Notre Dame what the young kid can do. To me, he looked pretty darn good. Riley Leonard comes over. He's the odds-on starter, most likely. He has also had a lot of success at Duke. A very highly rated dual-threat quarterback, but rated highly as well for draft prospects coming in next season. Coming into the season last year, before he got hurt, he was very highly rated by a lot of people looking at potential quarterbacks in this draft. He gets hurt, decides to come back for another year, and decides to go to Notre Dame. Absolutely massive. And guess who came with him? Another dominant defensive end. Both defensive tackles, very solid defensive end, and they're just adding more. Another really solid defensive end coming from Duke, one of their best defensive players coming over. This is why I say Notre Dame's defense may be one of the best college defenses we've seen in a long time next season. They have all the pieces. They've got the consistency at the coaching staff. They've got returning starters from the system. They're adding solid pieces in R.J. Oben and in the safety from Arizona State, Jordan Clark. It's quite scary. I don't want to be any of these teams on Notre Dame's schedule, especially on the offensive side of the ball. You're not going to want to play that defense. And so when you look at this schedule, there's a lot of W's. Texas A&M will have to see. New coach Jimbo Fisher out, a lot of turmoil in that program. It's the first game of the season. Probably a good thing for Notre Dame because it may take a minute for Texas A&M to get back on track. and getting them early is probably a good thing. I think that's a W. Northern Illinois, Purdue, Miami, Ohio, those are W's. They should be W's. Louisville was tough last season, but that should be a W. When you look at this roster with a competent offensive coordinator, it is scary. Louisville, I don't see a loss before the bye. That looks like a 5-0 team. Stanford, Georgia Tech, Navy? Who's worried about Stanford, Georgia Tech, and Navy? Those are wins. Then they get another bye because of how they do the 0 week by playing August 31st. Florida State, Virginia, Army, USC. When I look at this schedule, there's really only 3 games that are even remotely concerning. Texas A&M, Florida State, USC. Texas A&M because they got dudes there. They've been underperforming for a couple of years, but they still got some dudes there. Louisville, I'm just not really worried about them. I think it was a bit of a fluke last year that Notre Dame lost to them. Still had a chance to win that game even though they played terrible. And with a new offensive coordinator, I don't think we'll have the offensive struggles that they had last season. Florida State, I mean, we all saw what happened when Jordan Travis tragically went out. Okay? Florida State doesn't have Travis. I don't know how good they're going to be next season. We will have to see. But we are getting them later, which is not as great for Notre Dame. Because I think Florida State, again, might take a minute to get going. USC and Florida State, though, are really the only concerns. Virginia, Army, that's not... I'm not scared of those teams. If you're Notre Dame, that defense, that offense, a veteran quarterback in Riley Leonard, or a very solid young quarterback who's shown some very good pieces, played well in a bowl game against a decent defense in Oregon State, I don't think you're worried. Florida State, USC. That's it. Those are the only potential losses. And USC, let's all be honest. Last season, got rolled by Notre Dame, and that was with Caleb Williams, the people's choice for the best quarterback prospect since ever. People are saying he is the best quarterback ever in college football. USC is not going to have him next season, and he really did cover a lot of mistakes. I don't see them getting way better than Caleb Williams at quarterback, right? That's pretty hard to do. Hard to follow that. So I think they're going to be a little bit worse potentially this season. And this is Notre Dame that rolled them. Okay, Florida State. Again, no Travis. We saw what some of these quarterbacks were doing. That's tough. Now, Florida State does get some transfers. They're going to be good. But this looks like an undefeated season for Notre Dame. It does. Maybe a loss to Florida State. I think that would be the only one as a Notre Dame fan that you're worried about. The others, they got to be wins. Now, there is going to be an immense pressure on the coaching staff, on Marcus Freeman. This is year 3. Year 3 has historically been a big year for Notre Dame coaches. All the pieces are in place. You got to win all your games if you're Notre Dame. I think Marcus Freeman has to win. He has to say, you know what? I've got the experienced defensive coordinator, the experienced offensive coordinator. I've got a solid, proven quarterback and a couple of young kids that can absolutely play should there be an issue there. Should Riley Leonard have some injury problems coming off this tough leg injury, let's be honest. He's got all the returning starters he could want on defense. Offensive line is solid. Running back room looks solid. You got to win all your games. So a lot of pressure on Marcus Freeman. I think they'll be up to the challenge. They've gotten better as the year's gone on. And, year 1 to year 2, Marcus Freeman improved. And he's beaten top-ranked teams each year. So we know this team can compete at the highest levels. It's got to be a playoff run if you're Marcus Freeman and Notre Dame. I'm high on him. What do you think? Do you think it's playoff run or bust for Notre Dame? I'm not going to say national championship or bust because there's a lot of good football teams out there. But you got to win probably a playoff game or two. You got to get close to that national championship if you're Marcus Freeman and Notre Dame. I think they're a dark horse to win it all. When you put these pieces together, we'll have to see. Let me know in the comments down below what you think. What do you think of the new offensive coordinator? Do you think that was a big add for Notre Dame? I think it was. I think it was a huge upgrade from what they had. Blessing in disguise that Parker got pulled away as a head coach right there. You bring in one of the most successful offensive coordinators of the last couple of years. I think it's a big add. I've got high hopes for Notre Dame. One of my dark horses to win the national championship next year. Let me know what you think of my takes down in the comments below, and we'll see you tomorrow.